Welcome to the NCDWI Guy podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI Guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 69 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, we have a marketing guru joining us. Karin Conroy is joining us to talk about how to build your brand, how to build your web presence, how to improve your marketing. Obviously, broad topics. We're going to deep dive into some of these. Karin has an MBA from the University of California. She has a web design team that specializes in helping attorneys take their web presence to the next level. We're going to dive into some of these marketing issues, always something that I love talking about. Karin, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much for joining our audience today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to talk to you about all of this good stuff.
So yeah, I guess in terms of the what you bring into the legal marketing landscape, kind of talk a little bit about how you went from school and your MBA background into helping attorneys specifically in improving their brand and marketing presence.
Well, it was kind of an interesting time. I started my MBA in 2007, and I'm in Southern California. So the recession, especially real estate wise, hit out here a little earlier than the rest of the country. So by 2008, partway through my MBA, it was clear what was going on. I think most of the world had started hitting end of 2008, beginning of 2009. But so I am partway through my MBA. I was the director of marketing at Century 21 at the time. So I had a whole team of designers. We're working with real estate agents. And surprisingly, real estate agents are not super different from lawyers. They're, the way that Century 21 does it, they're all their own small business. They all have to kind of figure out their marketing. And they're not really taught too much about this. So they're sort of flying by the seat of their pants. So at the time, even before that, I had, learned how to do websites, and I was working at this little internet cafe in Laguna Beach. And so I had just a network of people who knew that I knew how to do websites. So as we're going through this recession, all of a sudden, there's people who suddenly need a website that didn't plan on going solo, who thought that they were going to be at this law firm for decades. They were kind of counting on that 1950s model of, I'm going to put my time in, I'm going to, do the right thing. And then I'm going to somehow have a pension, even though pensions are not really a thing anymore. So yeah,
it's so funny. I was definitely, so I went into law school in 2006, graduated in 2009. And I was working for the last couple of summers before I went to law school with a real estate attorney in Asheville. And so that's why I went into law school. I'm like, I'm going to go into real estate. This guy's killing it. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And then, 2007, first year of law school ends. And then you start to pick your specific classes that you want to do. And it became pretty clear to me. And a third of my classmates who also went in to do real estate, that we're probably not going to be doing real estate at the end of this whole right. endeavor. So criminal defense was not the original plan going into law school, but that's how the economy can change things like that.
Well, and that's just one of those life lessons that, I think we all learn, unfortunately the hard way is the best laid plans, laid plans, just, there's never a guarantee. And so this was one of the things that I learned in grad school, because my undergrad was all just all the soft skills and liberal arts and all of that stuff. So I never really took economics or finance and that kind of stuff. So it was a very eye-opening experience. And I really literally didn't know that these markets go in cycles. And so you can predict these things, and you can see these leading indicators of what's happening in the economy. And so, there was all of these signs that we all should have known. So it's fascinating to me. That was really my first experience with any kind of a recession. And that was a massive recession. I think we can all agree in, '08 or whatever year you want to call it for whichever part of the country you're in. But now going through this pandemic and having a different version of the recession, it's really interesting to see how things are kind of going through this economic cycle again. And it's different. And there's different things going on with the economy because of that pandemic. But I can see in Orange County, our real estate is insanely inflated right now. And I see that these people are like, sweet, I've got this, my house is worth so much and whatever. And it's like, okay, do you realize what's going to happen? Next
reality
week?
will set back in at some point.
Right. So that was kind of a harsh learning experience. But at the time, I started working with a lot of attorneys as a side thing. It was sort of this side hustle while I was doing my MBA and working full time. The MBA that I did was called the Fully Employed MBA. So I would go in the evenings, we would show up, do classes from like 7 to 10 p.m., wake up, go to work, then go to school. It was brutal.
Yeah, that's a grind.
Yeah. But anyway, it was an amazing time of life. But then I eventually figured out that the side hustle was way more valuable and having way more revenue. And just, I am the kind of person, I have the personality that I don't work well being managed. I need to, I'm a leader and that's just my personality. And so I needed to run my own business. That was the right thing for me. So that's how it all kind of started.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty interesting to kind of, I guess, have that experience of working with attorneys that are, trying to, I guess, kind of, hang their own shingles, so to speak, because you're kind of starting from scratch in terms of the marketing, as opposed to coming in and kind of adding this or that specific piece. And maybe that's kind of now where things are going more. But I do think in terms of, kind of our audience, I think that we have quite a few younger attorneys who are listening that are, starting their, marketing and branding and trying to figure out what needs to be done to have an online presence. And so, in terms of those attorneys that were kind of, leaving the established law firm, hanging their own shingle, coming to you, what was kind of like the place where you said, this is where we're going to start? We've got a billion different things that we could work on in terms of branding and, website and all kinds of online advertising, other advertising, not online. We could do all these different things. What was the kind of focus on that front?
Well, it's really interesting when you kind of put those two groups next to each other, like you were just doing. The recession group from, let's call it 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. I have a whole pile of clients that started with me back then and I still work with, and we have redone their site, some of them 4 or 5 times in the past, 10 years. And it needed to be done because it's just the nature of the internet. So comparing where they started to the group now, there's such different people and it's such a different world, because back then, first of all, that was an HTML site. So we're talking.
It's a brochure, basically.
It was a brochure. I literally had firms in New York that would mail me in the snail mail a brochure and say, can you convert this to a website? Because that was our understanding of it.
Yeah. So, and I think just to point on that front real quick, I think, if you're going back 10 years or 15 years, maybe you're kind of like at the point where the yellow pages are becoming obsolete and, people are hanging on to it, billboards slowly, these things are kind of slowing down. But now I think one of the dangers of the internet is that because there's so much that you can do online, it's easy to think, well, I have a website, I've got a presence on, I'm good.
That's it.
I've got my brochure online, because I see a lot of lawyer web pages that have that brochure.
Exactly. And so those guys, the old school, let's call them like old schooler people from the first recession, they started brochure wise. And that was our understanding of the internet. Like, you have to think way back. Facebook was only a year or two old at this point. Like, there was no concept that you would advertise on Facebook, much less There was no Instagram. There was no, none of these things. Like, so this is a different world. And much less would any attorney, like maybe some, shoe companies would advertise on Facebook, but, why would an attorney like that? Just doesn't sound professional, So that's a different world versus now. The people who are coming out of this pandemic and this recession, they're in a totally different mindset. We have kind of, a lot of us anyway, have gone through this experience where a lot of people are making these life choices, and they are intentionally deciding that working at this corporate law firm is killing my soul. And so I need to start my own thing. I need to work with the people who I care about. I need to change things for whatever purpose serves the long-term goals. And it's much more intentional. And they're going into it like face forward, where the first group of recession people, they backed into it and they kind of like piecemealed it together. And, and that was sort of our understanding of the internet at that time too. We were all just kind of like, things were flying at us. And now we've got this thing, and now we've got that thing. And we were just kind of, oh, I don't know, let's try it out. But now we have a much better understanding of who's out there, what the potential are, what the potential is, where we can find these clients, and how it actually works. So they're coming from this is a more strategic moment in time to be able to make those choices. So I'm seeing a lot of people do really good work around figuring it out first and laying out a plan and then executing, versus the other way where they're just shooting from the hip. And it sounds so simple, but it's something that needs to be said. And for a lot of people, they're like, okay, what's step one? Where do I start? Whatever. And it's like, okay, you're assuming step one is my step 12. And,
Right.
We need to back up and start with a whole set of things before you get to what you think your step one is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I think, in terms of the strategy piece of it and going into it with that intentional kind of mindset, as opposed to it being like, well, I lost my job, so I better go find something to do, kind of approaching it from this angle of, what can I do to build my own business? At our office, we kind of have this like Venn diagram where on one side of the Venn diagram, we basically say, clients deserve the best legal representation, right? So that, the best person that can help them in their particular need should be the one that they get to have represent them. And then on the other side is this kind of idea that the best cases go to the best marketers. And so if you're, the best attorney, but you're not getting out there in front of people, then that's not going to do that client any good. Yes. On the flip side, if you're a great marketer, but you're not, a good attorney in the courtroom, yeah, you're getting people to give you a call, but then you can't kind of deliver on what they need. So,
exactly.
In terms of kind of how that kind of intentionality and strategy plays out on, kind of in the web design, how are you kind of communicating, or in general terms, how are you communicating, an attorney's specific, kind of value proposition through that web page?
So first we start with strategy. And that's something that has not been the case for, forever. We didn't ever start with that. First, I would oftentimes start with like, do you have a headshot? And are you a super lawyer? And, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then it used to be the case, and for some agencies, it still is, that the client would write all the content. And we don't do that. We write the content because your website is a marketing tool, period, full stop. Like it is nothing else. It is not an ego exercise. It is not a resume. It is not anything other than a marketing tool. So when you consider it in any other way and you try to downplay the idea that it's a marketing tool, you're gonna water down your marketing message. And marketing is an exercise in psychology. So if you don't have a background in marketing or psychology, or you don't want to learn that, then you have to find someone or hire someone that's going to do that in the best way, so that you are understanding that buyer journey. And oftentimes that buyer, or your client, let's call them instead of a buyer, they will come to you if it's done well, and they'll say, I don't know what it was. I just knew in my gut. And that gut decision, that's not just like the universe and like crystals and like things just sort of like woo woo. That's the marketing psychology working. And they don't necessarily feel it, because if they felt it, it would feel too salesy and you would feel like a used car salesman, but they just know. So from the homepage, if that's where they land to begin with, they should know, number one, they're in the right place. And number two, that you can solve their problem. And that's it. And then number three is that they should have some very clear, singular call to action. It should not be, maybe you want this, maybe you want that, maybe you want the following 18 things. No, maybe they do, but they will find those, but they don't. They want one clear call to action. If you are distilling it and watering it down, you are destroying your results, basically.
Right.
And so what the website is not is, like I said, it's not a resume, it's not an ego exercise, but it also is not a piece of art. So this is where some, especially younger designers come in, and the designers bring their ego, and they get, kind of upset or frustrated with whoever their client is in creating a website. But in the end, the only person who's right is the one who shows results when you've got a website. So if the website's not working, and I have a lot of clients who initially come to me and they're like, I don't think the website's worth anything. It doesn't really do anything. It's just sitting there. And then my response to that is, well, that's a problem. Your website should be doing something. This is an important part of your marketing tool set. It is not the only part of your marketing tool set, but it should be doing something, and you should be clear on it, and you shouldn't need elaborate reports to know that your website is working. And so if it's not working, you need to fix it. And that means something different to every firm about what it means to have a working website. So I worked with firms in DC who do like appellate law. They do not want hundreds of visitors coming to their site from like a consumer level and calling them. Like that is not who their target is. So their idea of the website working is that they get comments and feedback that it looks really elegant and that their reputation is elevated, and they're feeling that people have been to that website and they had an experience of an elevated reputation. That's it. It's working. That, check the box. For firms like yours, you want the other thing. You want all that traffic in. You want to be able to filter people through. So your idea of if your website is working is totally different. So you have to, what does that mean? And then how do I make that happen?
Yeah. And I think in terms of like the specific call to action in particular, that is such an easy thing, I think, for many people to miss. And we missed it for a long time at our office. We had tons of blogs, over 100 blogs, I think probably really elegant and elaborate pages, but then there was really no place that you could determine what was going to happen with, do I want this person to, leave a email, address or sign up? Do we want them to call? So we started changing just our main web pages to, call us now, and like a big thing at the big button at the top, call us now. And then every blog article at the end would be, a little section, contact us to discuss your specific situation. And, immediately, like overnight, like the calls went up, because of that just specific call to action. And before, again, in that like brochure format, especially when we were having, companies that I think were really good at creating a beautiful website, but not interactive. It was all just kind of like this template website. And they, created one for us this day and one for XYZ law firm, the next day, using basically the same template with different colors. You're basically getting this very, kind of non actionable page. Yeah. And that really is important. I think having just that spit, what is it that you're asking the potential client to do? Do you want them to send you a message through your website, call you, Do you just want to pass along information and kind of
Mhm.
build your, your web presence? All of those things are important. But if you want the client to call, then it better be pretty easy to call you.
Right. But you also need to realize that that action is of value to whoever's on that website.
Yes.
So I'm not going to just give you my email address. That's
Right.
so annoying if I think you might spam me. And I'm going to think that you might spam me based on what my experience is on your website. So if you've got that, you probably have seen they're not that many anymore, but those guys like walking out of the screen, like call now, the super desperate. I am not giving that guy my email address, much less picking up the phone to call him. So before you get to that action, don't just lead with the action. It's like dating. I mean, you don't just start with, whatever, the actions are that you're leading towards in dating. You have to engender trust. You have to show them that you understand their problem. You have to lead with the client and their user needs and all of that stuff. And people skip over that stuff because they feel like it's, that's all the woo-woo stuff. But what they kind of leave to the side is that when every human being goes to a website or not even a website, any kind of interaction, you walk into a store, you need to know that it offers what you're looking for.
Right.
If I go into the grocery store and I'm looking for, 2 or 3 specific things, and I feel like this store is not going to have it, I'm not going to sit and walk up and down the aisles if I don't feel like they have it.
Right.
So this stuff is not rocket science, but I think that because websites are relatively new technology, people think that it's somehow there's different human conditional rules that apply, and it's not. We all have the same kind of psychology and kind of user experience that we expect. So it's important to take that step back and think about how your users are going through that website. What do they care about? And then, as much as people don't want to hear this about marketing, there is a lot of trial and error. And so, what marketing people call it is A/B testing, but it's exactly what you talked about. Like you try the first version without the button, and then you try the button version, and now you've got 2 different tests, and you can measure the success of each and say, well, clearly the second one was the one that worked. So how do we make that better? Now we try 2 different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, even within that kind of testing,
and there's ways of doing that through all kinds of, it's a lot of trial and error. Yeah.
Yeah. Even with doing that split testing, then you just start to get more and more refined. So it started with, do it without the specific call to action, then then it was kind of like, do we do the button in our kind of colors of our website, the navy blue and green, or do we do it in red? And so we tested that, and the red, killed the normal colors that we had on the website. So that trial and error piece of it really is, I think, important in a specific website. So you guys probably do a lot of the split testing.
Well, for the most part, we have gone through this enough that we understand how to put a page together in a way that is going to use all the right rules. Over time, when we're working with clients, we may try different options, but there are certain rules when it comes to especially the kind of call to action thing that you're talking about. So Seth Godin, he wrote this book called The Purple Cow.
Great book.
But this is like way in the beginning of the internet. I want to say maybe 06 or 07, somewhere way back, when we were still doing those brochure websites. And the idea is that you assume, this is a little rude to your visitors, but you assume your visitors are all monkeys, and you leave them 1 banana on each page. You don't give them 15 different things. You can have secondary calls to action, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. But your main primary call to action follows certain rules, and there's only one of those. So whatever your brand colors are, you will have one very contrasting, high contrast color that is your call to action color. And that's all you use it for. And that way, the visitor's eye, the way that eye tracking works, start in our society where we read left to right. We start in the top left corner, look at the logo. That's why the logo should always be there. Then we kind of move in an F format. And in that sort of middle right area, as your eye is moving down from that logo, that your call to action should be right in there. And that's why you see that so frequently in the same format as most websites. And not everyone, lots of times clients will be like, I want to be different. Can I put my button over here? And it's like, no, you're ruining your success. You can do that, but you will come back to me a few months later and ask me to move it because it's, not working. Yeah. So, you can't change the way people's eyes move. You can't change the way people's thoughts are processed. This is ingrained stuff. And so if you go against some of these rules, you're not going to just be like this outlier who has, is so cool and innovative. It's just not going to work. So, so you have your main call to action button. And so for you, like, you're saying use a nice red, but you shouldn't be using that red in other places. Or if you do, it should be clearly a secondary. So a secondary call to action would be links that are maybe text links, like not a button, not that same large or, whatever the size of the button is, but the button that stands out is the clear primary action. But you could have links, or you could have smaller buttons that maybe have like a clear background or, one of your other brand colors. And so there are other buttons like, okay, you're not quite ready to call me, so this happens a lot for like divorce attorneys. You are doing the research, that down the road, this is probably what you're looking for. But you need to let that thought simmer. And so you're not going to click the main call to action. It's there and where to find it when you need it. But right now, maybe you want to read a blog post or maybe you want to look at the bio to kind of feel that lawyer out and see if that's the right person for you. So those secondary calls to action are important because they kind of nurture that client's visitor, bring them along on, keep them active and keep your firm top of mind. But for a firm like yours, you're probably not going to have much activity on the secondary calls to action. I mean, someone who's coming to your website is, number one, probably going to be on mobile. So your mobile site, you need to start with that, that design, and then your desktop is secondary. And number two, your map results have to be perfectly fine-tuned, and you have to have better results than your competition. Your reviews have to be current and plenty of them, and the more the better, and you need to be constantly updating that kind of stuff because those are the things that your visitors are looking for. But like an estate planning attorney, nobody cares where they're on the map. They will drive an extra 10 minutes to go find an estate planning attorney if it's somebody that their neighbor told them is the perfect person. So, all of those details are going to be different for every firm.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of interesting in terms of the, content strategy of, as you're starting out trying to kind of logistically put your web footprint out there. I think it's something that when you're initially building a website, if you're creating your own content or you're going to an outside developer to try to help you, somebody like you to kind of help through this web branding and design phase of things. I think it's something where, especially as you're starting a business, it can be so exciting. And there's, you want to put all of your time into this and you're like, this is going to be great. And then, 3 months down the road, it's like, well, I don't have time to be working on the website. So, one thing that I think has been really important for us is trying to kind of make, producing content part of our DNA, just to have like, constant streams of kind of creating new content, some of it that works great and some of it that completely tanks, but just like consistency with, regards to putting new content out there. What does that look like in terms of like a strategy session, maybe specifically with a new client? How do you kind of, determine how much content you're going to be trying to create over a longer period of time, as opposed to just creating the website itself?
That's a really good question because it's something not a lot of people think about. They really feel like you've got all this ramp up stuff to start with on the website, getting your logo, whatever. And then like the boxes are checked and they're done and they just kind of walk away. Right. And a lot of times they don't even recognize the ongoing kind of website maintenance, much less a content plan. Right. So to begin with, there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be happening on a regular basis with your website because your firm is literally got security risks if you are not keeping things up to par with security, and your emails can get bounced. And there's all that stuff, that you need to be making sure that that's an ongoing, consistent plan. And then on top of that, you need the content. And so, of course, I'm going to give you the it depends answer, because I have kids. And so
that's
a
very lawyerly answer. That's good.
But it does depend, depending on, once again, going back to like the different kinds of practice areas, the amount of content that established estate planning firm that, maybe it's an attorney who's been working for 20 plus years, and they've got this massive network, they've got referrals coming in from different places, and their business is probably majority built on referrals.
Right.
They're not going to need much content. They just need to rank, and they probably need to rank for their name, not for search terms like DUI and things like that. So that's not competitive. Like, there's probably nobody else trying to rank for whatever their name is. So that's going to be a very minimal, maybe a couple times a month, adding a new blog post. And it would be much more of a resource type blog post where it may not even be called, the blog section might not even be called a blog. It might be called resources or something like that, where it's like just offering something very useful. And here's the other tip that I will say about the content. It should be about the what, not the how. So you should be talking about what your clients' needs are, what kind of problems they have, all that, but not how you do it. And so this is where a lot of attorneys get really worried. Like, they are so worried about all this legal language that they're going to put on the site, and none of that should be there. Like, you shouldn't be talking about how you execute these cases and how you work with your clients, and like basically the stuff you learned in law school and the stuff that you are going to talk to that client about. That would be ridiculous to have that on your website. That's not marketing. That's your job.
Yeah. Right.
So your website should talk about the what, so all of those what things that they care about, and then leave a nice blank at the end of those questions where like that's that point of tension where, okay, I get that you understand this what, and you understand my problem. Now I need you to get me to the part about how you do that. So now that's when they, call or email you or whatever that call to action is that you want them to take into account. So content wise, you should be asking lots of questions, like those frequently asked question type things. And Google changes these algorithms all the time. So I don't have a specific number for you. Like, you should always have at least 6 blog posts a week, or, there is no number. It should be quality stuff that people are searching for and that people care about. So as you start adding content to your site, you should be paying attention to what they care about and what's ranking well, and then just do more of that.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful advice. I think one of the things that is, helpful in terms of trying to craft something in response to those frequently asked questions is all the time during, DWI consults with potential clients that are calling in, we're having our first conversation, they're asking questions about their, problem points. How's this going to impact my insurance? Should I have been read my Miranda rights? Does the officer have the ability to draw my blood? I told them that I didn't want them to take my blood and they did it anyways. Are they allowed to do that? These are the kind of questions that I think are helpful because they're not really necessarily in response to any like legal, issue or a case law. It's just, what is the frustration point for the client that is calling in? And then again, maybe you answer that to some extent, or maybe it's more just like, again, maybe it's more of it depends answer at the end of the day, but, call us and we can kind of talk through logistically, what the best options are in your particular situation, but you're addressing the problem point that the client is experiencing.
You're showing you understand it. And there's 2 things I would add to that. So one firm that we worked with on the West Coast that did criminal defense, they talked a lot about what's at stake. And so this is what people care about, like what is at stake. So for them, there was a lot of immigration stuff, like, am I going to lose my green card? I, what are these things that are at stake? This is getting to the heart of what they care about. Am I going to lose my family, or, whatever, those things that they care about. So talking about what's at stake. And then Seth Godin, kind of the guru of marketing, he talks about creating a tension point, and that marketing is about more, but that you're trying to make a change. So it's either, a lot of times a purchase, or you're trying to change someone's mind, or maybe the change is that they pick up the phone. So they change from seeking someone to calling someone. So it's just that little change. And so you have to create that tension point to make the change. So you're showing that you understand the question, but then you're leading them to make that action, take that action, make that change.
Yeah, I love that. I think that this, Simon Sinek talks a lot about this, kind of people don't care what you do, they care why you do it, right? It's kind of the same thing, for the client or the potential client. It's kind of like, having the charge itself is not the primary concern. Like having to go to court down the road is not the primary concern. Will I end up in jail? May not be the primary concern. It might be, how is this going to impact my job? Is my wife going to leave me because she keeps talking about how much I've been drinking? And so like, how am I going to preserve that relationship? Moving forward, what could I do that would allow me to, maybe succeed in the courtroom, but I don't really care about that. Like I care about this from, my life perspective. I have a client recently that, got a DWI and had, a series of DWI charges kind of spread out, but had been a constant tension point. His wife left him. And so he ended up doing all of this stuff that, was helpful in the courtroom, but the whole reason he did it was so that he could be reunified with his family. So he went and did like inpatient treatment. He did a continuous alcohol monitor. He got a job. He attended 3 AA meetings a week. And he did all this for 6 months without his wife or daughter being around, simply so that he'd have like the shot of having them back in his life again. And again, like all the time, I'm talking to him about what's going on in the courtroom. And it's just like, he really doesn't care about that. Like, he just doesn't, it's not important to him. And again, things went great in the courtroom because of what he had done on his own. But that was just not what his primary concern point was.
But this is where we've seen this significant change in marketing. So it used to be those brochure sites, and now it's about that client focus. And what that client focus means, you see this all the time, is that storytelling, but that the story you just told is what that means. And so when you think about that story and that client and how he is trying to redeem himself, and this idea of redemption and like the justice so that he can see that sort of light at the end of the tunnel, so he can be reunified with his wife and all of that. Now, when you think about representing that on a website versus a picture of a gavel or a picture of, what you see all the time is a glass of whiskey next to a gavel and handcuffs
and keys.
And so picture that guy going to a website and he sees the whiskey and the gavel and handcuffs. That's the last thing he wants to think about. He wants to think about the reunification and redemption story that you just told. And so if you can represent that story on your website versus that horrible moment that he knew he was in trouble, that's the difference. That's what it comes down to. And so when you now see all of those other websites where it's the handcuffs and the gavel and the glass of whiskey and, or the police, the sirens and the picture of the, like that's what everybody uses. And it not only is it cliche, but it really just turns people's stomach. It's the last thing your visitor wants to see.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the tail end at this point of kind of a movement in criminal defense, specifically of marketing that is fear-based to kind of marketing that is kind of problem solving based. So, I really do think we're kind of at the end of that. I don't think that most of the attorneys that I talk to here in our area really go about it in a fear-based model of like, you're really going to need a lawyer because you're going to go to jail. You're going to go to jail.
No, I see it all the time. And especially in ads and on landing pages and stuff, it's still, they're sending stock photos that have the police sirens. And I'm not kidding. I get the whiskey glass thing all the time. It's like, no, we're not going to, we're not going to do that.
It is interesting to think about it from that perspective, because when you again, from the client's perspective, they've been beating themselves up, whether it's for
Right.
30 minutes or for 3 hours or 3 days, however long it's taken for them to kind of, get to your website or to try to call somebody about this. It's been nothing but kind of like, self-destruction since
Yes.
that time frame. And the faster that you can kind of get to a point where you're helping to redeem the person and basically be like, look, this is a change point. Like, you can just kind of go through
I'm your
this and be in the
solution.
same place.
Yes. And I am your solution.
Right.
And as soon as they feel that, then that's where they have that gut reaction that I talked about earlier. And it's not a gut reaction. It's all that marketing work that you're doing to, number one, be different from all those other guys who have the whiskey glass and the, police tape and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden they're like, I don't remember what they said. I get this all the time. I don't remember. I talked to you a while ago and I don't remember what you said. I just knew that you understood how to do this work differently.
Yeah.
And and then you get these lifelong clients because they just have this connection where they feel like you totally understand them at a different level. They're not just a criminal.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's so important. And I would say specifically at the in terms of DWI specific representation in the criminal context, because it is a place where, nobody that was going out to have a drink is like, I'm hoping to get arrested. That may happen once out of every 10 times where somebody, or not 10, what out of every 10,000 times where somebody's like, I'm at the end of my line. I'm either going to go, police will find me or I'm going to be dead at the end of the night. Like that might happen at some kind of like very small range, but most people that have that charge don't plan on committing any criminal activity that night. Circumstances change. They don't understand what the legal limit is as applied to them, whatever it might be. So when they're looking for an attorney and all they're seeing is criminal handcuffs, whiskey, all of this stuff, it's just like, that's not who I am. Like, how could these people understand me if this is the client that they're trying to bring in? How could this client, or how could this attorney get who I am? Because that's not me at all. Like, I'm a good person. I'm, contributing member of society. I'm a teacher. I'm a nurse. I'm a construction worker. I get up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, provide for my family, whatever it might be. Criminal is not part of my identity, but they're still trying to grapple with that too. Cause it's like, it's not part of my identity, but I'm, was in handcuffs in the back of a police car last night as well.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so that's where your approach needs to start. And then everything flows from there. And so then you understand all the following. Once you have that kind of definition and you figured out how to approach those clients and how you're going to do that differently, and you're coming at it from a place of compassion and understanding and, redemption and all those great adjectives, then all the following marketing decisions come more easily, because then it's, okay, am I going to do this? And, does it fit into that definition? Is this where I feel like those clients are and the things that they care about? Should I go on TikTok? Does that make sense for my client? Maybe they're on TikTok. Maybe I have a client who did a bunch of immigration work and she was and she speaks fluent Spanish. And so she was finding a very specific niche of Spanish speaking people looking for immigration attorneys on TikTok. And it worked great. And that's like her entire marketing approach. So there's no one thing that's like a flat no across the board. But you have to figure out if it fits for you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that consistency in terms of your message is so important. And I think it's one of the reasons for me that doing any type of advertising at this point has been really difficult, because it doesn't really fit in with our messaging. Because there's no ability in most advertisings, pay-per-click campaigns, legal marketing directories, there's not enough space to really tell your story. Like, you only have, couple of sentences or, a headline, 5 words to be able to communicate. You're just one number among others. And maybe you're one of the numbers that shows up because you're paying for that space, but you're not able to really communicate who you are. So the client that calls in doesn't have any reason kind of pre-existing to talking to you, to trust you, or to kind of know who you are. And so then you're spending your whole conversation trying to sell yourself. Whereas if you've already been able to communicate your personality through, your, practice area page, your bio page, a blog that somebody has come on. Now, at least part of your story and who you are as a attorney, a firm has already come across to that person. So I think that's really important to be able to kind of get as much of your story out there to them as well.
I would add that there is one bridge to that search and then pulling them in to get them to read your story is that, especially for your practice area, local search is super critical. And part of your story and your trust indicators are being told there. So if you have a lot of reviews and, you have to be in the right area, but you have to have a lot of reviews and you have to show up, and then, that will translate to a click. And that's all you need them to click. And it's not necessarily through the ads, it's through your local like search results and your Google My Business profile and all of that. But those reviews on there, those are worth more money than your Google ads oftentimes.
So much more.
The Google ads are the opposite of trust indicators. People are super leery. They kind of don't really trust ads. And then an ad for a lawyer on top of it, it's like, it's a little shady. So to show up on maps with a ton of reviews right away, that's going to be that great entry point into getting the click, pulling them into your site, and then being able to tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. The Google reviews are maybe like one of the most critical pieces to any kind of branding strategy, because it's somebody else that's talking about you. You should have a strategy around
it. You should have either you or someone in your firm who is on top of it and being as consistent as your content plan with those reviews, chasing them, following up, sending thank yous, doing all that stuff, because it's that important.
It is. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I think that's one of the things that we emphasize quite a bit at the office. People probably get sick of me, other attorneys at the office talking about the Google reviews. That's part of like our branding strategy. It is. It's a huge deal. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, I appreciate very much you coming on and sharing your wisdom in terms of branding and marketing. Obviously, this is something you've been doing for a long time with great success for lawyers of all different kind of practice area backgrounds. Tell the audience, if they're interested in looking at you, having you create a kind of branding strategy, marketing campaign for them, how can they contact you?
My website's Conroy Creative Counsel. And I'm on LinkedIn. I write for the ABA and all these other websites and everything. But between LinkedIn and ConroyCreativeCounsel.com, you should be able to find me pretty easily. And I'm sure we'll link it somewhere too. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I'll definitely have that in the show notes as well as on the blog page. So yeah, if there's anybody that is interested in building their marketing strategy and getting Karin's thoughts on how to improve the web presence, this is just the launch pad for doing that. So Karin, it's been an awesome conversation. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode of the podcast. If you did, please share the podcast with another freedom fighter in the criminal defense community, and be sure to leave us a rating on iTunes. See you next time.